Hi everyone! Today we are making a very British classic recipe, the scones. The recipe seems so simple, but the perfect scones doesn't come easy. Scones are supposed to be light, fluffy and soft interior with a little crisp to the edges and top. There are many little gritty things that can get in the way of achieving that all-buttery point of perfection. I will share with you a few tips to make these beautiful scones. Now, let me show you how to make it. Prepare a large bowl for making scones. You will need some space for the mixing process. This provides plenty of room to spread the butter and mix the dough easily. Make sure that the butter is extremely cold. Cold butter promotes the flakiness, high-rise and fluffy scones. I usually take the butter out of the fridge and cut into a large cube right before I'm ready to mix the dough. Don't cut it too small or even grate it. That will make the butter melt faster and you will have trouble with a sticky dough. For the liquid, most recipes calls for whipped cream or milk. However, when the scones are served with clotted cream and jam, I found this combination way too rich and not tasty. I prefer to use homemade buttermilk for the scones. Buttermilk makes the scones very tender, has a better crumb, and provides a slightly tangy taste. To make the dough, we will start by sifting all the dry ingredients. Don't skip this step, it helps to build a light texture. And since we are using buttermilk, baking soda is added to this recipe. The acid in the buttermilk reacts with the baking soda and produces carbon dioxide, which helps the scone rise. I like to add some lemon zest to give some flavor to these scones. And to incorporate the butter, first I will coat the butter with the flour. Then, using my fingers, I start pinching and squeezing the pieces of butter. You can see I broke down the butter into smaller pieces. Then, I switch up the technique. I take a handful of the dough with the bits of butter and I flatten it between my palms. Look at those thin stitches of butter. This once is entered the oven, it melts and releases steam, which leads to that magical texture. When you feel between your hands all the butter pieces are flattened, you can start adding the liquid. Slowly pour in the buttermilk, stir gently with a fork. By using a fork, the liquid will evenly distribute without overmixing the dough. Once you see the dough comes together like this, you can stop mixing it. Dust your work surface with some flour and transfer the dough over. Press the dough together, gather up any small crumbs. You can flour your hands slightly. For extra flakiness, I will do a rough puff pastry style, flattening and folding the dough. Fold 3 to 4 times, building in those layers. As you can see that I'm not kneading or stretching the dough because we don't want to develop gluten and have a very tough scones. If you like to add some dried fruit, nuts or maybe fresh fruit, you can add while you're building these layers. Once it's done, shape the dough into a thick dish, about 3 cm thick. Cut into rounds with a floured cutter. Remember when you cut it, don't twist the cutter or the scones will be lopsided. I'm using 5 cm round cutter. Feel free to vary the size a bit. As long as the thickness is the same, this should cook at the same speed. Place them on a parchment-lined baking tray. After you cut the dough, now you have these little scraps. Do not need the scraps. What you can do is collect and press it together. Stand the dough up and press again. Press until it is 3 cm thick and then you can cut again. Do the same with the remaining dough. If there's only a little dough left, just shape it around with your hands. And to give the tops of the scones a bit of shine, I'm going to apply some egg wash. This will give a nice golden brown finish. Avoid the sides and bottom because they will affect the rice. Once it's done, bake them in the preheated 200 degrees Celsius fan oven for 15 minutes. It feels so good every time I see a puff-up batch of scones out of the oven. The base scones has a crisp, lightly caramelized exterior and a tender, buttery, just sweet interior. Look at the flaky texture. Messy and crumbly is a good thing. And what is the proper way to eat a scone? Jam first or cream first? Lots of people are debating this. The Cornish tradition is to cut the scone in half so you have two flat rounds. On each side, jam is spread first and then the cream on top. The jam being spread first is what makes it the Cornish way. I personally prefer the royal way. I will put jam on first with cream on top and then sandwich them together so it's not overly sweet. But ultimately, you can do what you want. The scones will still be tasty. Take a small bite and enjoy the happiness brought by the scones. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye everyone!